and welcome to the first and maybe only episode of String Into Warmth, a fiber podcast. My name is Debbie, and I'm a knitter who lives in Brooklyn. I have been knitting since 2006, when I was in college and living in Boston, but I did it pretty assiduously for about 8 years. But after I moved to New York, it really kind of fell off as a hobby for me. But this past year, during the pandemic, during quarantine, I've really been enjoying getting back into knitting as an indoor hobby, as a creative outlet, and as a way of connecting with people over the internet. I've really been enjoying watching other people's knitting podcasts, and thought that it might be fun to create my own and kind of document my journey through, my own personal fiber history. I definitely have about 4 bins of yarn underneath my bed that, even though I wasn't knitting or using them very much for the past 5 years, I've moved them across state lines to 3 apartments in New York. So, this kind of literal baggage that I've been carrying around with me. And I'd like to, use them up, kind of document my process, my procedures, the things I make. And I thought it might be fun to share that with other people. Also, definitely while I was looking for knitting podcasts to watch, maybe other people of color will be able to relate to this, but the feeling of scrolling and just hoping that the next face that you see is going to be not a white one. I think there are plenty of people with very creative, very funny, very welcoming knitting podcasts who are people of color, but I think I also want to be that for somebody else, to be able to see a face like their own in their feed. Hello from the future! I realized while I was editing that episode that I forgot to even talk about the name of the podcast. String Into Warmth comes from something that I said when a non-knitting friend of mine asked me why I liked it so much. And I told them that knitting is the art of turning string into warmth. And that was just kind of something that fell out of my mouth at the time, but it stuck with me. And the more I think about it, the more I like that as a description. I think everyone watching this, knitters, crocheters, fiber artists of all kinds, can agree that yarn in and of itself can be beautiful, can be an art object. But for me, the more interesting part of that is turning it into warmth, because warmth is for humans, for animals, for people we love. And I think that that's like a human-centered way to think about what we do. I think warmth can be not just physical warmth, but also the warmth of relationships, of connecting people, of making something disparate or something elongated into something contiguous and whole. So I think with this podcast, I want to talk about that network forming, that relationship forming, that literal warmth building, and to think about who we're doing it for, in what service are we knitting, how can we build this into part of our lives, as well as doing a dive into fiber history in general, and also I guess my personal fiber history. That's what we're gonna do here. Back to me from back then. So I probably should say that my major, jump back into a large project was over Winter Regnum, which is the time period between Christmas and New Year's, which I always try to take as a creative retreat type thing every year, reset, relax. Even when I wasn't knitting a lot, I was sewing or doing other things. So this year I cast onto this sold out prop because I saw Melanie from Cozy Cardigans podcast knit hers, and she did it in her own yarn, which is super beautiful. But I saw it and I was like, oh, that looks like a great project. I love this sort of cropped and boxy shape. So I decided to make my own. Maybe I should stand up at this point. the camera that I'm doing this on does not have a front-facing screen, so this is gonna be like is this a shot? Who knows? Confusing and awkward adventure for all of us. But this is the Saldana crop from Boylan Knitworks. You know that feeling when you have like a bunch of different leftovers in the fridge and you combine them into like one meal of leftovers, but it's like new and great, and it uses everything up that you had like perfectly? I call that leftovers Tetris, and I love it. And that's the feeling that I got when I was knitting this out of stash. So a lot of this is reclaimed yarn, actually, recycled yarn from sweaters that I have like a lot of in my stash, because especially like right after college, when I was time rich and money poor, I would buy like sweaters from the dollar a pound and harvest them for their yarn, and I still have a ton of it lying around because it gives you a lot of yarn. And I really recommend it as a method of getting like cost-effective, environmentally friendly crafting materials. Which is not to say that like I don't support indie dyers and indie mills, because those are also fabulous, but I just think that yarn recycling is another way of getting something to work with. Anyway, all of this to say that the cream on this is recycled cashmere, and the tan along like the ribbing is a recycled camel cashmere, and the dark gray background of this braid is leftover Isager alpaca from a still light tunic that I knit a couple of years ago. So, and the rest of it is, unfortunately, yarn from a yarn swap from like a couple of years ago when I was still living in Boston at my then local yarn store, Gather Here in Somerville. Love them. So unfortunately, I also cannot like share with you the exact names and details because I don't know it. But I really love this as a knit. I think it fits really well. I knit the smallest size almost exactly straight, but I added a couple of rows to the yoke because when I reached where you separate for the sleeves, obviously this is a circular yoke pattern, when I reached where you separate for the sleeves, it wasn't quite deep enough for like my body shape, and I hate it when sweaters bind too closely under the arms. So I just like kept going for as you would for like one of the larger sizes, and I think I'm really happy with that decision. The thing about this sweater is that it goes so quickly, but because I was a dingus, I swatched for gauge, but not for color. So I spent a lot of time changing my mind, ripping back, trying something out, changing my mind, ripping back. I definitely knit this entire sweater at least twice, which I could have, you know, avoided with just a little bit of prior planning, but of course I didn't. What can you do? I think one thing that I perpetually was looking for in this sweater, because it's all kind of like complementary colors, I would say, neutral, natural, brown and gray and cream. I wanted there not to be a lot of contrast in the color work, so this braid in particular, like the main color work section, gave me a lot of trouble because I tried it in the dark gray that is the current background and the cream. I tried the tan and the cream. Obviously I didn't follow the schematic laid out, and I followed the chart but not the colors of the chart. And I was just like, I want it a little less glaring, a little less eye-catching. So I wound up with this like dark gray and tan foreground, which I do like. You know, low contrast color work. Tell your friends. I was also thinking about not doing the fleece stitch on the body, because I saw a couple of people online that omitted it and they looked great, but I'm actually really glad that I did, because like the subtlety of this, it's like a mousy gray yarn and like a tan yarn, the subtlety of that color shift is very pleasing to me. It reminds me of shorebirds or plovers or sandpipers, something like that, and is one of my favorite parts of this knit. Yeah, top marks. I mean, I feel like if you watch knitting podcasts, you've seen these many, many times because evidently it's a very popular pattern, which I can definitely see because it's like so, the color work really makes you want to knit like one more row. Great pattern, great work. So this is the first thing that I have, the first sweater that I have finished in years, God knows, feels really good. So then I dove right into another one. I'm already pretty far into this actually. This is the Snow Crocus sweater by Midori Hirose. It is a top-down saddle sleeve jumper, which is a construction that I haven't actually done before. And yeah, it's going pretty well. I'm knitting this in Valley Yarns Northampton in dark gray, which is a worsted weight yarn made in Peru, made from Peruvian yarn. And it is squishy, very bouncy. It's 4-ply, so it's mega round. And it's got like a tiny bit of pleasing tooth to it for like that hint of structure. I wouldn't say it's prickly at all. It's not rustic. I wouldn't go like that far, but it is, I would say, like a really nice workhorse yarn, suitable for like something that you would use Cascade 224, for example, if you don't want to like patronize Cascade anymore. I think this is a great choice. I got this in like 2012 from Webb's, because Valley Yarns is Webb's house brand. That was originally meant for a dark and stormy cardigan by Thea Coleman, and I definitely cast on for that and knit up a couple of balls before eventually frogging it, because I think the fit was just like not what I wanted. I think it was like too closely fitting the size that I chose, and it was just like very constricting. So frogged that, and it's been kicking around my stash for a while until I decided to knit this one. The pattern calls for the yarn to be held together with a strand of mohair silk lace weight, but I'm just knitting it in this worsted right now. The roundness of the yarn is really making these cables pop, so I think it's a great choice. I should say actually that this pattern, Snow Crocus, is 60 pages long, and when I downloaded it I was like kind of intimidated, but actually it's super clear. The reason that it's so long is that Midori Hirose kind of like separates out the sizes independent of each other, which like balloons the page count. But I think once you pick your size, you can just like follow that along and totally ignore the other like 70% of the pattern count. Oops. I'm wearing my cicada earrings because number one, they're my favorite, but also number two, I too am crawling out of the ground after a 5-year hibernation. So, 1 second. Okay. So it's very clear. She links to video tutorials of all the specific techniques that she uses, so I really think that it's suitable for like lower intermediate knitters for sure. By the time that I was like doing the back, because the way that this is constructed is that you knit the funnel neck in the round, and then the back and the front separately flat, and then you pick up around the sleeve cap to knit the sleeves down. So by the time I was like starting a couple of inches into the back, I had already memorized the pattern. It's super easy to read your knitting after a while. Highly recommend this pattern, it's wonderful. So yeah, like this construction was not one that I had experienced before. It's top down saddle shoulder, and you can see I am kind of far along. I have 2 sleeves ready, and then am knitting down the body. It's a little bit longer than crop length right now, or maybe it's like, I could add ribbing and call this a crop sweater, but I kind of want it to be full length. So I have another 4 or 6 inches, I would say. I'm knitting this mostly as written, the smallest size, except For the funnel neck, I'm knitting this on size 10s. I didn't have the size 8 needle, 2 sizes down, that the pattern called for the ribbing, so initially I did the ribbing on size 9s, and I had seen on Mel Makes Stuff, another Melanie, but not Cozy Cardigans Melanie. She does really great, like, in-depth looks into one project and really like explains all her design thinking, her choices. So I saw in one of her videos that when she wants ribbing to squinch in a little bit more, she uses like Eastern purling method, like mounting the stitch the other way, which takes just slightly less yarn, which makes the finished fabric draw in a little closer. So I did that because I had the size 9 needle and not the size 8, and I wanted just to like a little more. And I don't know whether I'll notice it really when I'm wearing it, but it was fun to learn. I learned a little bit of combination knitting, which I'm a continental knitter usually, which was always fun. A learning experience. So I did that, and then underneath the arm, when I was picking up, I picked up a couple of extra stitches, because also I didn't want like holes or whatever, but also because I wanted to make a tiny little gusset, because I hate it, as I said, when underarms bunch. So made a tiny little gusset underneath the arms, and now I'm speeding down the body, and we'll be done pretty soon, I think. I'm stoked. I'm gonna wear this sweater a lot. My wardrobe is like pretty monochrome, if you haven't noticed. So I think this should fit in really well, be super wearable. Okay, time for, I think, a section that I might call stash diving. As I said, I have these 4 historical bins of yarn, and I don't really know what's in them anymore. So I think this is going to be a project to help me categorize, take stock of what I have, and try to figure out what I'm going to use it for. So currently, on that note, I have 2 yarns that I think I'm going to use together. This one, hopefully that will focus. This one is a ballet pink recycled cashmere fingering weight that I counted it out, like about 1,000 yards of, which is like definitely enough for a sweater. It's beautifully soft, has a lovely halo, but the thing is the color is just not one that I'm going to use. And the other one is similar. This one is a cashmere silk lace weight that's blush pink, kind of, just like a little bit darker than the previous. If I hold them together, maybe you can see. But I'm just not really a fan of this light pink situation. Back when I was harvesting the most yarn, I was doing it looking at fiber content, which is, you know, why these are kind of like Luke's fibers, but not really giving any thought into colors that I like or what I would use it for, which is why I have so much of this still kicking around, like 1,000 yards of this, as I said, and for this, like I would say almost twice that much, 2,000, so I figure I can eventually do 1 strand of this, 2 strands of this for, I don't know, what's fingering plus 2 lace? Sport? Is that sport? Maybe a light DK? But the thing is, to remedy this color situation, I think I'm gonna try a little natural dyeing. I've never done it before. I've played around with acid dyes, but I think my vision for this project is that I'm going to use avocados for it. I'm in the process of accumulating avocado pits and peels just in my freezer, and I've been doing a little reading about the process, and I think that it's going to be like pretty straightforward, just like simmer a bunch of peels and avocado pits in water, which will produce like a reddish dye liquor. I'm aiming for like maybe a terracotta pink, dusty rose kind of situation, which I think will work better for me. And because these are all animal fibers, the tannins that are naturally present in the avocado pit should naturally mordant it onto the fiber. I won't have to like play around with alum or I guess like iron mordant or other things that you might have to use for linen or cotton plant fibers. Yeah, so I'm excited to play around and see what happens. Like, who knows? I'm also interested in how different the silk will take up the dye relative to the cashmere. So yeah, we'll see. I definitely have a couple of weeks of assiduously eating avocados, you know, for the cause, before I can do that, but maybe I'll take some footage of it and hopefully it turns out well. And the last thing that I think I have to show off this week is not a stash acquisition, but I guess a tool acquisition. When I wasn't knitting a lot, I was still spinning a bunch because I have a bunch of spinning fiber as part of my stash. And for me, spinning is like a very meditative, creative hobby that you can do without really thinking about it. It's very smooth brain, no thoughts. As you can tell, I'm not a particularly intentional spinner, a craft that engaged the hands, but not really the brain. Perfect for watching TV, listening to podcasts, etc. So when my knitting friend Emily, hi Emily, asked me for advice on which Bosworths to get for her first one, when I was like looking through their current stock list, my collection, and giving her my thoughts and advice, I saw this. This is a Hollywood Whirl midi spindle with a red heart shaft. And I love like the creaminess and even color of the Holly Whirl with the high contrast shaft. I've been wanting one of these for forever. I just think it's incredibly beautiful, like stark. And it reminds me of moosies, which are the Bosworth's spindles that they make from fallen moose antlers, which are like white, almost grayish within the whirl, and I think they look really good with a dark wood shaft as well. But yeah, I've been like stalking or coveting, I'd say coveting a Holly Bosworth for a while, and when I emailed them to order it, Sheila Bosworth said that they don't often work with that wood, so I was happy that I snapped it up. I spun up the little like tuft of tester fiber that it ships with, and am probably gonna pack something else onto it soon. I don't know, but it's just so pleasing. For me, Bosworths are like the canonical spindle, just in terms of their shape, how well they spin. I love them the most. So I think that might be it for this episode. Thank you for spending this time with me. It's been really fun. I'm excited to come back in the next episode, which frankly, who knows when that'll be, because I will definitely look at this footage first, see how god-awfully awkward it is, and then make some decisions. So I hope I'll see you again in the future somewhere, hopefully here. You can reach me at string.into.warmth on Instagram, which is probably where I'm most active, or on Ravelry. I'm at Stockinette Stitch, but it's ST because you can't have a name that long. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this, and bye until next time.